Hi everyone! Today I have a story called The Spiffiest Giant in Town. This book is by Julia Donaldson. Alright. The Spiffiest Giant in Town. Let me move this so we can see. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same pair of old brown sandals and the same old patched-up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. But one day George noticed a new shop. It was full of the spiffiest clothes. So he bought a spiffy shirt, a spiffy pair of pants, a spiffy belt, a spiffy striped tie, some spiffy socks with diamonds on the sides, and a pair of spiffy shoes. Now I'm the spiffiest giant in town, he said proudly. George left his old clothes behind the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the sidewalk stood a giraffe, who was sniffling sadly. "What's the matter?" said George. "My neck," said the giraffe. "It's so very long and so very cold. I wish I had a warm scarf." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his striped tie. "It didn't match my socks anyway," he said. As he wound it around and around the giraffe's neck, it made a wonderful scarf. "Thank you," said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat who was bleating very loud. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's my sail," said the goat. "It blew away in a storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat." Oh, he looks so sad in this picture. "Cheer up," said George as he took off his new shirt. "It keeps coming untucked anyway," he said as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. "Thank you," said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, but look at me, up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a tiny, ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squealing. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's our house," squeaked the mother mouse. "It burnt down, and now we have nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house." Oh, they're so sad. You see their faces? Their eyes are down and sad. "Cheer up," said George as he took off one of his shiny shoes. "It was giving me blisters anyways," he said, as the mouse and her babies scrambled inside. The shoe made a perfect home for them. "Thank you," they squealed. George had to hop along the road, but he didn't mind. As he hopped, he sang to himself, "My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse, but look at me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's my sleeping bag," said the fox. "I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag." "Cheer up," said George as he took off one of his socks with the diamonds on the sides. "It was tickling my shoes anyway," he said as the fox. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said as the fox snuggled into it. It made a very fine sleeping bag. "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, but look at me up and down, I'm the spiffiest giant in town." George came to a big squishy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" said George. "It's this bog," said the dog. "I need to get across, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." "Cheer up," said George, as he took off his spiffy new belt. "It was squeezing my tummy anyways," he said, as he laid it over the bog and made an excellent path. "Thank you," said the dog. The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself. "My tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat, on a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of my socks is a bed for a fox. My belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog, but my pants are falling down. I'm the coldest giant in town." Suddenly George felt sad and shivery, and not at all spiffy. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes," he decided. He turned around and hopped all the way to the shop. Oh my gosh, this is a silly book. But when he got there, it was closed. "Oh no," cried George. He sank down onto the sidewalk, and a tear ran down his nose. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. And then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. George took a look closer. "My gown!" he yelled. "My dear old gown and sandals!" George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. "I'm the coziest giant in town," he cried, and he danced back home along the road. Outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," I said. "Open it." George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Look inside the card, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. The card said, "You gave your scarf to a cold giraffe, your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. Your belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town." All right, that's the end. So, George the Giant tried to be the spiffiest giant and get all these fancy clothes. And then, over the course of the day, he was giving out clothes to all of his friends that he met, people that were in need. But then, his friends gifted him with a crown because of all his kind words and his kind actions that he helped the students. So we have to think about, how can we be kind? Does it matter what clothes we wear? Not so much. It matters what's in our heart and how kind we are to other people. I challenge you to be kind to your family, loved ones, and friends. Be kind to your teachers, be kind to your neighbors, so you can be like the spiffiest giant in town. All right, thank you for joining me. Have a good day. Bye.